Okay, we're 1 minute out, so I just want to introduce myself. And good morning and welcome to Appalachian State University's Center for Academic Excellence Free Learning Conference 2019. My name is Daryl Laws with the Center for Academic Excellence, and I will be here to help troubleshoot any Zoom technical issues you may have throughout this session. So please note that as a participant, your onboard video and audio have automatically been muted. So for any Q&A, please feel free to unmute either or both channels by scrolling to the lower left-hand corner. And you can simply unmute by clicking on either your audio and or video. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce UNC-Charlotte's the Center for Teaching and Learning, Garvey Pyke, Jeff Meier, and Enoch Park, and their presentation, Campus Efforts in Supporting Adaptive Learning.
All right, thank you all. So my name is Garvey Pyke. I'm at the UNC-Charlotte Center for Teaching and Learning. And we've been working with adaptive learning for a couple years now, and we've been sort of accelerating what we're doing. So we wanted to share a little bit about our experiences here and how we've been able to support it at a campus level. So I'll give you some background, some of what we've been doing, the course expectations we have for any courses that would be involved in this, what our RFP process has looked like that we've gone through, and what platforms we've considered, and sort of what are the takeaways. Those are the pieces I want to discuss first. So, and of course you can ask questions in the chat, I guess. So the first thing we did was we really wanted to put a call out to high D, F, and W courses. And I guess, Enoch, you could advance the slide. We looked at a lot of STEM courses. You can go forward one more, thanks. We looked at some STEM courses to partner with because that's where a lot of energy has been on our campus. And we did some recruitment about a little over a year ago, and trying to recruit faculty that are willing to, that were interested in doing this kind of thing, and that were not just interested, but had the capacity to put in the work, because it's an incredible amount of work to redesign your course, whether it's for adaptive or anything else. And we started working last summer with two courses that we're going to really talk about a lot today, and we've been doing, so even to this day, we're sort of gone through some ongoing development with these courses, and we piloted them last fall and spring. And we'll also talk a little bit about the incentives packages we were able to put together for faculty, that faculty needed some stipends and course buyouts, and also having students to help with certain aspects of course building. And we'll get into that a little later. So if you can go forward one. Thanks. The expectations we had for anyone that we're going to work with is that adaptive learning gives an incredible, every platform that uses adaptive learning gives an incredible amount of data on student performance. So the expectation would be that faculty who teach this way were really going to use the data that they learn about their students and student progression in their course to shape the classroom experience. It can't just be a tack on intervention. It really has to be an essential part of the ongoing and evolving pedagogy of the classroom. Second thing is, you really have to make adaptive learning a substantial portion of the course. It can't be, again, and we've had certain classes where they are just all in on high stakes testing, where they give 3 high stakes tests a year. It's worth 90% of your grade. Homework's worth 3%. Something else is worth 7%, and it really has to be more than that. And then the third expectation for anyone engaging in this kind of work is that it really has to be a fundamental redesign for the course. And I'm kind of hitting the same theme over and over here, is that it cannot be a slap on, tack on, add it to your course and now it's adaptive. It's really, you're changing not just what students do outside of class, but we're changing what students are doing inside of class. And I assume everyone on this call has a little background on what adaptive learning is. It's really creating personalized learning paths for each student in a course. It's this idea of mass personalization. So on the next slide, we went through an RFP process to identify a vendor partner to work with us on this, because what we were looking for is not off-the-shelf courses that were already built, but we wanted to build things from the ground up, because the courses we were building, the 2 courses, there weren't courses out there like it. We did some demonstrations and went through the RFP process, and we really got a lot of faculty input on which product. And it came down to 2 products that were very, very similar and very, very good. And our team would have been happy with either of them, and we gave the slight edge to Realize It, who we're working with now. The other thing I'd say is, depending on what your position is in the university, your value add, that one of the value adds that you can bring to this project is that faculty don't typically know how to go through IT governance. They don't know how to work with the legal office to make sure that there's data protection. They have never really done much with contracts and purchasing in terms of IT purchases and so forth. So that could be one of the pieces of the project that you manage. And when you think about project management, it's more than just getting faculty to build the course and teach the course. There's a lot of moving parts for this kind of thing. So when you think about a campus strategy, you really have to account for, what are all the things that go into this, and what is my team going to handle, what is the faculty going to handle, and so forth. So you got to have a real division of labor for these things. And for us, we were hitting, just beware of what your academic calendar is like. And for those of us, I don't know if all of us are in the UNC system, but I know we're going to have a tricky budget, for the next couple of years here with the timetables changing and so forth. So just beware of those kinds of things as you move forward. On the next slide, I did talk about, we do have a few faculty using off-the-shelf products, but really where our major effort has been in terms of our time and resources has been in these, sort of build from the ground up in our College of Computing and Informatics and in our engineering group. So what did we learn from this? Again, I'm just giving a real high-level overview here, but if you could go to the next slide, Enoch, is that this is what I'd recommend ourselves and anyone else, looking to do this kind of thing, is that I would have a very robust intake process. We've kind of gotten a couple of stumbles on this, is that the faculty you engage with on this kind of project, it's a very big project, and it really comes down to how much are faculty really ready to redesign. And this is something I get from, this readiness to redesign concept is something from the National Center for Academic Transformation. If you all remember that, with Carol Twigg and her work in large course redesign, over 10 years ago, was this idea that faculty really have to be ready. And it's not just the individual faculty, but it's the chair and the department. Are they ready to have a course design that is consistent for all sections of the course? It really doesn't do any good to have one section of one course be adaptive and the rest be the previous design. So you can pilot it with one section or 2 or 3, but you really have to have an agreement in place that once it's piloted and it's working, that the course design, the new innovative adaptive course, will be scaled out to all sections of the course. So if you don't have that up front, then they're just not ready. It doesn't matter if you have one champion. If that one champion can't convince the rest of the people teaching it or the department that this is the way that the course is going to go, not the section, then they're not ready. Second thing is, just having a realistic time frame for how long this takes. A year. It really takes a year or more in some cases, and maybe shorter in other cases. We've had in our College of Computing Informatics, they had already done a lot of redesign work. They had developed a lot of their own content, so they started this sort of they started kind of on like second base, to use a sports analogy. So they were really far ahead of the curve in terms of course redesign. So when we worked with them on adaptive, turning it into an adaptive course, they had really done the hard work of getting course consistency and redesigning to be more interactive and active learning based in class. And so they had a lot of their own content and videos, and that really, really sped things up for them. But in other instances, we're working on actually math statistics course right now for math pathways. And, we're having to identify content, from day one. So it's just different. And then the third, the third lesson is how do you develop that in-house expertise on your own team? Because you're going to have some people support it. You can't just throw this to faculty and expect, them to just take it and run with it. You really have to manage that from a project management standpoint. And for us, it would be very difficult for us to support, for example, more than one product at this point for doing a ground up build. It's very technical for some of the things with their design tools that they use. So you want to not spread yourself too thin on that one. And then on the next slide, 2 more lessons learned. Actually, I've got two more slides of lessons learned, but just think about the cost of building a course. I was thinking about cost this morning, actually, and at our school, I was calculating, tuition and fees for a student enrollment is roughly, it's about $750 per course for an undergraduate class. And as you may know, tuition makes up a little less than half of our overall operating expense for a university. So the other half is state appropriation. So why am I bringing this up? Well, if you think about it, so when you bring the tuition fees to the table and you bring the state appropriation to the table, there's one way to look at this is to say each course or each enrollment costs about $1,500 for every, in each course. And I'll give you an example of why this is important. We have a particular large enrollment multi-section course that enrolls over 1,800 students per year, and their current D, F, and W, drop or a D grade, F grade, or withdrawal rate is about a third. And so out of 1,800 students who take these, this course every year, you have about 600 who don't progress. 600 times 1,500 is like a $900,000 problem. And I'm just talking about one freshman course. That's it. So that's like $1 million problem right there. So think about what, that's your ROI piece of this, but be realistic about how much staff time you're going to use and what other things you're not going to be able to do. But think about all the things that, the opportunity cost of what they're not doing. I mean, in this particular department, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in the service of Fs. I mean, if you think about it that way, they have entire faculty lines with salary and benefits that are dedicated to just failure of students, and that's an incredible waste of money. So how do we get more students to succeed? The other thing is think about content ownership. We've had a couple of false starts with publishers who would let us use their content, then they wouldn't. So there's some issues around that. And if you have faculty authors, that's great. But we had one case where the faculty member literally wrote the textbook, but his publisher wouldn't allow him to use that content. So he had to sort of import it through other means. And I know it sounds crazy, but that's the world of academic publishing we live in. So there's an issue around that. And then going along with that is publisher promises. They tell you one thing and they might end up doing another. And we had several that's an ongoing issue for us. The seventh lesson learned is, I mentioned this earlier, is how do you navigate the university IT ecosystem? Faculty don't know how to do that. Hopefully you do. And you can figure out how to get these things integrated and through data security and all the things that you need to do to make sure that everything is going according to your IT infrastructure. Don't skip that, and don't wait till the last day and then ask your IT like, hey, we need you to turn this on for students. That's something that hopefully nobody on this call is doing. And then building versus buying. there's the pros and cons of buying something off the shelf versus building it from the ground up. Building it from the ground up allows a little more depth and customization, but if you pull something off the shelf, that it can get you more speed in terms of your project. And I'm not saying that pulling something off the shelf is bad. It's certainly great. There's tons of great adaptive courses. They just didn't fit for the particular projects we've been working on so far because the content didn't exist. However, even if we were to pull something off the shelf and use the adaptive product as is, we still have to figure out which modules do we pick and choose to use from, which learning outcomes. So there is some customization that still has to happen. And in addition to that, you still have to fundamentally redesign the course to be active learning and to use the things that integrate with adaptive. So it's more than just pulling something off the shelf, even when I call it a off-the-shelf solution. So those are the lessons we've learned. So what is the bottom line? What would I say are the takeaways? Next slide. It takes a long time. Find your early adopters. Make sure you have plenty of money to do it. And this is a long-term project. This is not long-term just to complete and get it running and implemented, but adaptive learning is here to stay. And so you should be thinking about this in terms of, what can we do now in the near term to try to get some courses going, but more and more courses will be going this direction for the foreseeable future. For the next 5 to 10 years, this is going to be, this is massive. This is not going away. This is not a fad we can wait out. This is it. That's what I got to say about that. So take it away, Enoch.
Thank you very much, Garvey, for the great higher level overview of the project. And at this point, we can ask if anyone has questions. Okay, so we can continue on. Good morning again. My name is Enoch Pyke, and I serve as the Quality Matters and Online Learning Specialist here at UNC-Charlotte. I'm glad to meet you all in this year's F-State Free Learning Conference. And as we reflect on how we can make good selections for adaptive learning courseware, which we may use for the next several years, if not a decade, I just thought of one of the children's stories. So once upon a time, there were 3 little piglets who built their houses. Do you remember this story? So thinking about that in academia, the story I have was the first piglet went out and found a bunch of straws and built his house. He loved his house, but one day a big black wolf came out and huff, blew the entire house. So just like this, I've seen many faculty especially loved a product called WebCT and Angel, if you remember, for their LMS. But a big black wolf came and took away the products out of the market. So that was one story. And the second piglet went out and found the sticks and built his house. The sticks were free and open for everyone to use. But again, one day a big black wolf came out and huff, blew the entire house, and it was hard to hold the house up. Many campus administrators loved and still loves open source LMS. And it is important to know that the true cost of own for the open source product. So it may not come with the price tag, but you have to provide those support sometimes with yourself or sometimes with the service provider, so that there are hidden costs on it. And finally, the third piglet went out and found the building blocks and built his house. the building blocks were heavy to build, but each block added strength to the house structure and connect each part to hold the house firm. So his house could use also electricity, water, gas, and plumbing all together. And the big black wolf couldn't blow the house up. So in this way, the LMS might be one of the environment in which the entire campus community, faculty, students, and staff find the first-hand experience of what it really means to have an enterprise solution which integrates and interacts with the multiple campus resources in a single application environment in their daily life. So the moral of the story is that when you think about the adaptive learning, there are already multiple platforms available, and the many campuses, just like we did with the LMS, we will have multiple migration and iterations of the product. And the question is, if you build it, will they come? Will students will come and learn? And we hope so, but how do we know? And there are cost hikes and true cost of own, and there's a publisher and integration tools, and definitely the flexibility and instructional control is needed. So now when we think of adaptive courseware that require further integration than an LMS, one of the closest analogies could be building a house. Building a house is different from just buying a car, where one can pick and choose features and maybe negotiate hard with the dealer for a purpose and a set of preferences. A house is where the entire family will reside in it, and where all resources, electricity, water, gas, sewer, internet, fiber, air conditioning, etc., needs to be working as a system. Also, once you built it, it is actually much harder to change or redo any portion of it. So not only that, it is assumed that one has appropriate skills to make the best use out of each part and maintain them. A swimming pool would work best if you know how to swim or have fun in the water, and how to clean the water. And manicured garden, woodworking station, etc., needs that skills and maintaining skills as well. So for that reason, it is important to have an intentional plan and ahead of making choices. So definitely a blueprint of planning, and intentional planning will be needed to have best selection out of the adaptive learning. And in terms of makes use of a collective wisdom from a village of participants or the whole campus community, because faculty representatives of the course or course designing faculty will have to understand how to handle the curriculum and learning design. I definitely enjoyed a lot this morning's keynote. Dr. Masland talked a lot about, instead of covering the topics, in a way we have to learn about learning how people learn and understand that, because understanding the mechanism of how it works makes difference for the students' learning. The exact same way, using the adaptive learning platform, faculty have to understand the learning design and curriculum design and how to handle those structure and the design of the course. And that involves also departments to determine and decide for the curriculum structures, and not to mention academic technologies and trainers have to work with the faculty so that not only just courseware but also the tools and the additional resources need to be also connected and integrated as well. For example, one of the courses that we worked, we have integrated 3, 4, 5 the external software tools in the same platform. Each of them we have to look at it, test it, and connect it, and then also, once again, test the feasibility and usability as well. So that means that on top of that, sure enough, we need to involve the campus enterprise ITS, because the students' information and data will be used and integrated and flow almost seamlessly on the platform. So in order to truly use the data that the platform produces and make available for the faculty, we have to work together with the whole campus as well. That means also then faculty again will have to understand how to analyze the data, how to use the data, and how to make decisions based on the data, student analytics data, that to make adjustments and the revisions in the learning path. It's not just a one way that everyone have to follow. It is personalizing every student's own path and how we can best provide an opportunity so that every student will be successful in our courses. And that involves the instructional designers from campus and instructional designers from the vendor. Librarian can also work with the contents, and especially OER content, and registrar may also get involved. What if a student is so good and going ahead and finish every content just in 1/3 of the term? What do we do? Can we have them credit and finish the course, or do we have to make them wait until the regular term is over? So that kind of questions can be discussed and answered, and sure enough, we need a strong project management. So we will have to set the criteria to make consistent decisions, and what is the expectations of the outcomes? What is the project timeline? As Garvey just mentioned, that it takes time and it needs a time, and also think about the whole duration of the time, not to mention the budget. The more time you spend, you probably need more money, and human resources and courseware requirements, and how we can support the course development, design through development and launching the course, and even analyzing the data, and how we can see and prepare for the scalability and sustainability. So a group in the courseware in context started with the collaboration between Titan partners and the Online Learning Consortium. Now OLC is overseeing the quick framework, and that gives an idea about how the process of courseware adoption goes through. So roughly you have a determining the needs and the objectives, and then you have going through the selection process, and then finally you will disseminate and scale the program as well. So this gives an example of the stages, the 6 stages that institutions can go through, and this describes the typical process. One campus and institution may go through different paths. However, in terms of the needs and preparation, this gives a good guidelines to how to choose this and select the courseware. So you will find this information from the quick framework and the guidelines for the courseware adoptions. And also we have shared the case study developed with the Titan partners to share the experience with you. So I'll just upload this link to the chatting box right after so that you can download it. But having a frame set would be one of the effective ways to do from the experience that we all had in last decades, how to select the best and LMS that fits and works in your campus. Many campus and institutions found that instead of a trial and error, you need to have that framework set and have a selection process, explicit selection process that will help actually bring the campus to agree, and also have most campus constituents be satisfied through the selection process and the outcomes as well. So we'll definitely use that experience in terms of selecting coursewares for the adaptive learning platforms. Do you have any questions so far? So I will give the mic to Jeff to continue technical and implementation of adaptive learning.
Okay, thank you, Enoch. Just by way of introduction, my name is Jeff Meier. I'm the technical team manager here in the Center for Teaching and Learning at UNC-Charlotte. And just want to take a few moments to talk through some of the details of what we have experienced and gone through in the past year. So next slide, please. So early on, as Garvey mentioned, there's really two types of adaptive platforms in the space. There's the ready-made experience where ebook vendor products are out there and there's no development required, basically off the shelf. And for example, McGraw-Hill's Alex product, Pearson has products out there as well, and Cengage does, and there's others out there as well. We have multiple vendors actively being used here on the campus. But really want to talk about the full development experience, as Garvey and Enoch have alluded to. It is a very labor-intensive developing course content. The first course that we brought live was essentially pretty much complete, so the migration to the Realize It platform was pretty straightforward. The second course from the engineering side is very math heavy and required building from the ground up, and that process started in September of last year, and the course is almost done. So it's been almost 12 months of development just to get the course ready, even though he went live with it in the spring semester. And what we found that this creates a situation where the faculty can really better define course content and see where there are gaps, because as you go through the course development process, our faculty have realized that they missed a concept, or they could have gone into more detail in a specific area, and going through this development brought these things to light. The initial investment is substantial, as you can understand. You know, we've been working on the one course since September and it's almost done. We would recommend at least a 2-semester development timeline before going live. Otherwise, you get a partial course, so you know that the experience might be a little bit different for students. Another thing is to consider team availability over the summer. Unless you're willing to have a summer stipend or anything like that, it can and will impact the progress of course development, especially if there's a lot of travel for faculty and that kind of thing. We would highly recommend having student workers available to assist. In our engineering course, the instructor has hired 7 TAs to help him with the course development and testing, and he's needed every one of those individuals, and they've made some remarkable progress over the summer. Another thing is to create a test student account or 2 in your LMS. We use Canvas here at UNC-Charlotte. That way, the instructor can log in as the student and see what the experience that the student sees to make sure that there's nothing that's been missed. And last but not least, as you're doing development, you're going to want to refresh the adaptive learning platform, and you need to make sure that you don't have any issues with the scheduling of that, especially if you're piloting and you're developing at the same time, having a live course and doing development. you run the risk of students losing work. So you don't really ever want to get into that situation. Next slide, thanks. And here's basically at a high level what we did. We created an RFP mid of last year to identify potential vendors, and we had 4 vendors that replied to our RFP: Sagans, Barnes & Noble, Cogbooks, and Realize It. And we scored the responses and invited the top 2 vendors to do an on-site, and Realize It, as Garvey mentioned earlier, was our top choice. And we completed a contract with Realize It. And our contract had the idea of creating 3 pilot development courses to build out the content, which were then copied into the main course when they were completed. And again, we created test student accounts to allow for adequate review of the content. And one of the things that the vendor is very good at, we have weekly meetings with the entire team to talk through issues, where we're at in the development process, things that we need to do, that kind of thing. So it's been very, very helpful. The vendor's been just great to work with. And one of the things we noticed that any LTI-enabled tool will work with the Realize It adaptive learning platform. We integrated the Zybooks ebook for the data structures course that we're using, and we have MATLAB Grader integrated with Realize It as well, because our engineering course uses MATLAB. And we found out that we were one of the first institutions to do this integration with Realize It, the MATLAB integration, which has been most helpful for the development of that course. And just as a sidebar, Alex is also integrated into courses via NLTI. Next slide. This is an example, just a screenshot of what the Realize It platform looks like. This is what they call a network map for a particular learning node. And as you can see, there are different types of icons for the different areas of content. And the student will, if you can see across the bottom, there are 5 levels of competency, if you will, for students as they go through the learning objectives. You can notice here that the student is considered a master in 2 of the areas, physical maps and introduction to maps. And they have competence, just competency in 4 others. And the grayed out ones are the ones that they haven't started yet. And the 2 with padlocks are locked nodes that cannot be entered until the student has achieved at least competency in any predecessor node. So in the case of a map application, the student would have to show competency in physical maps, political maps, and the 3rd one, which I can't see the label of, unfortunately. So this prevents a student from moving ahead and not learning, grasping all the concepts in a particular course. Next slide. So just by way of summary, you really need to treat this effort as a formal project. Have a quote-unquote project manager assigned that can kind of shepherd the resources and shepherd the effort and keep everybody on track is a very here. Awareness and training for all stakeholders. The time commitment is fairly significant, especially for courses with a lot of content, like the math content in our engineering course. And a good plan here is to complete 1 learning module per week, but that can be based on complexity. And you're also going to want to use an iterative testing methodology. When you get a module completed, you're going to want to test it. When you get another module completed, test it, and then do a system test with the first module to make sure that all of the connections are working appropriately. Communications with students, especially around a process, as the students are going to have to go through a course in a specific sequence. But once they understand what that sequence is, the feedback that we've been getting is the students really enjoy this type of a learning platform. And another question is, what is important in the use of adaptive learning? Is it the learning or is it the grades? We found that students are learning quite a bit more, but at the same time, there's a lot of competition that students get involved with. They want to do the best they can, and they get upset when they don't get a 100% on any particular learning module. So the peer pressure is really something interesting to behold. So next time, learning analytics. In a particular case, I've realized that I don't have a screenshot, but you can drill down on each of the learning nodes in the map, and you can see how your students are doing. You can email the students right from the Realize It application. And it really helps the instructor gauge how the students are doing, much more so than just having it from the LMS. And once again, creating the test student accounts is an important piece of this. So you always want to see what your content looks like as you're developing. And implementation and feedback is critical. Having the TAs involved in the course development really helps. It's great to have another set of eyes or several sets of eyes looking at the work that's being done, because as you get into it, the old saying, you can't see the forest for the trees, is very applicable, because there's so much information. Having extra set of eyes is very important. Okay, I think the last slide. Okay. I'd like to thank you all for your attention and turn it over and see if there's any questions.
So Enoch I'll defer this one to Enoch, because I know he's actually on the quick framework steering committee. So you want to talk a little bit about that, Enoch? There's a question in the chat.
Sure. Trying to look at the question. The quick framework is an effort from, again, Titan Partners in Boston and the Online Learning Consortium work together to provide a framework. And this is also used for the APLU, the adaptive learning projects. The participating grantees use the framework to start and have the similar the criteria, so that the grants also can see the outcomes and effectiveness of adaptive learning. So the institutions will use a significant portion of their course with the adaptive learning, and the number of students involved, and the setup. And instead of a specific product, again, about 16, 17 multiple platforms were available for each institutions to be able to choose. So for that reason, how to choose an adaptive learning platform that's suitable for each campus and institution's objectives and situations in the context was the key issue to approach. So the partners and consortium actually approached to develop the frameworks to give a guideline. So now the version that we see is a revised version already from the initial version of the framework, and the participating institutions share their experiences with the group, and they also formed an executive committee to go over the items and the analysis. So the key is that instead of an individual campus and institutions to try to figure out of this vast array and notion of products, the institutions can actually learn from the experience and have an criteria that they can use, and that's the main idea about that. And the framework is available for free and open to any institutions, so the institutions can start to planning for their adoption process as well. So maybe at this point, as we waiting for more questions, maybe we'd like to see how many of you actually are planning to implement adaptive learning, or you're supporting. I know there are librarians and faculty involved, and what is your stage in selection process? Does anyone involved in your campus on discussing and planning for the adaptive learning?
I guess everyone's ready for lunch.
Yeah, it would be a thought for your brain as well, a topic to think about it, and if it is a new idea that you are hearing about it, UNC-Charlotte and other members will be definitely glad to share more about it. And also another way is that the talking with the faculty who has invested their time and started adapting in their courses, you might find an ideas how those adaptive learning could help them and see that structure. And for example, one of the findings that we hear from the faculty is that the roles has been changing in this product. The faculty become a designer of the course, design of the curriculum, and analyzing the data and the deciding what needs to be adapted, what needs to be modified on each case. And also, one course also reported us that the graduate assistant's role also changed. Instead of a mundane grading of the quizzes and exams, those parts are done on the platform, the adaptive platform, and graded automatically, and with the even grading engine behind it. And students are also progressing on their path and their learning progress. So graduate assistants also found that instead of just grading the quiz, they are actually spending time for individual students and where you are, where the students is, and then giving that very precise, well, if you didn't understand this topic, how about going back and look at it? And if you have a difficulty in this topic, you can look at this topic and before you, as a preparation. So it's a much more sophisticated, much more personalized advice that graduate assistants can provide. And they were surprised that, this is different than my grading work. Not to mention, faculty actually oversee all those new way of mentoring, new way of advising, new way of helping students to be successful instead of yeah, you sink or swim, you figure out, follow me kind of a situation. So definitely faculty and graduate students, and as well students themselves, the roles are changing. It's much more active, much more focused and personalized in their own learning. So I guess it's a time for our shameless plug that the UNC-Charlotte has been hosting digital learning forum, specific focus on the digital and adaptive learning in every spring. And next February will be the third annual forum on the digital and personalized and adaptive learning forum. And so if you have a interest and if you are looking for ideas, we definitely love to have you join us and discuss with not only just Charlotte, we actually have the all UNC system institutions represented and share, as well as community college systems. So that could be another opportunity for you to learn and discuss about the topics on adaptive learning. And the whole idea is that, again, many of us, Charlotte and many other institutions, found that going to the route of adaptive learning and selecting and implementing, not to mention the whole designing process, is quite daunting. It needs a lot of work, and we definitely want to reduce the amount of effort by sharing instead of each individual institutions work alone and really try and find out what it is. So you're more than welcome to join us in next spring. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact any of us, and we'll be more than happy to talk with you and your team at your campus, as well as your faculty who is interested in and IT and support teams, so that you can have a successful process.
Thanks, y'all.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking your time and presenting this year at the Free Learning Conference.
Thank you, Daryl, and thank you everyone for joining us. We'd love to talk more with you, and thank you for joining us today. Enjoy your conference, the Free Learning Conference. F States definitely had a great event today, and we'll continue listening and discuss with you throughout the day.